I think that what we want to do is just kind of engage in conversation at this point. You know, we spent the day, we started talking about customer experience, customer journeys. You know, we talked about accessibility. We talked about the house of customer communications process, and then kind of came back to customer experience and CCM. But there's a lot in there. So, you know, I think we could take this a number of paths, and I think it makes the most sense to just kind of do that the way that people see best fit. So maybe I'll start by saying, any burning questions or topic tracks that we want to go over? Yeah, Randy. And Randy, I'm going to bring you the mic, but only because we're trying to get this into the video.
My burning question is, when we looked at all those statistics that everybody put up today, and essentially all these companies are trying to push you off of print, right? Why is it that these strategic visionaries at these companies can't comprehend that they should be happy that they've got an engaged customer regardless of the platform? Yes, that one costs more, but if that's the preferred choice, why are you trying to push somebody where they're not comfortable? And what's the loss of ROI by doing so?
Yeah. So great point. And I think that one of the things that we often run into is it is seen as low-hanging fruit in terms of just saying, like, postage costs are high in the sense of higher than electronic, and that's low-hanging fruit for many companies. But at the same time, the people making that decision aren't necessarily looking at round trip, and they know that there is a portion of their customer base that should be transitioned over, but maybe not as aggressively as they want to do that. Any thoughts from you guys on Randy's comment there?
Well, I think some of them, sorry. I think that part of the organization gets it. To me, I think the big problem is siloed organizations, because a lot of the low-hanging fruit are transactional type documents that people see as a burden, like a bill or a monthly or a quarterly statement. Those are often the ones that they try to go after most. And I think the reason why is that marketing has the least control over those documents. And so there's a disconnect between the people that have to pay for the documents and the people that understand customer connection. I mean, to me, that is still, now, I remember talking about that in a previous life with Donnelly 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. Same thing, but I don't think it's changed a whole lot. There's still this disconnect, and until a lot of these types of documents that you call low-hanging fruit are seen as potentially valuable and proven to be valuable, which is another problem, then it's going to continue to happen.
And I think in other areas, one that comes to mind is reward cards, where they are getting, there are other print streams that are actually getting more usage. Although I'm surprised transactional doesn't do more real estate sales with paper. So I think that where print may be losing a little bit in one area, they may gain it substantially more in other areas. So I think that there are opportunities that print has to gain in other areas. It is kind of weird using your digital rewards card at a grocery store and then every month getting print paper coupons in the mail. It's just mind-boggling how we've transitioned, and I don't know if there's any target you can throw at and say that's where it's going to be in 5 years or whatever. So
I would just add too, about the integration of communications, kind of to build on that. So if you send out an electronic communication of some kind with an offer, sometimes, right, that'll get skimmed, that'll get stashed. If you come back with, something that kind of goes with that, complements it, right, maybe a printed follow-up, there's opportunity there, right, to get a better reaction and participation in the offer.
Right. Other thoughts to Randy's question? It's not just us up here. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Paul?
Just to kind of add to the statistic component, the transaction mail is I know, sore throat. The transaction component has been proven to be opened and read more. So the marketing jumped on it to a certain degree, but to your point, marketing always had their own budget and probably had more budget and did their own thing, and they had control. And I can say this, I'm married to one, right? So they're crazy, right? They want to do it at the last minute. They can outsource it wherever they want. They don't have to do things. They can break the rules. And so I think the collaboration component hasn't come to fruition unless somebody really drives it top down, because they have the power and the money to do so. And that's one of the strongest silos. So I think that's one of the reasons that cross-channel and multi-channel is the true reality right now, because to get everybody to the party has been hard.
Yeah, and so Randy, maybe one other comment there is companies are, it's tough to get a case study in that space, right? Companies that are doing it well have found their secret sauce and they don't need to share that or choose not to share it. And at the same time, the companies that have made mistakes don't always, those mistakes are not always made public either. So you have some companies tripping over themselves for being too aggressive in paper suppression and the pain that it caused on receivables and call center, but that's not a case study they're going to share either. So I think sometimes it's just that everybody's kind of going through that learning process and sometimes making the same mistakes because it's not out there from an educational perspective. Yeah.
They're still aggressively trying to get rid of print. Who knows? That seems odd to me. I mean, Verizon's a great example. You open a Verizon bill, they do a reasonably good job now of using white space and using teaser marketing, using full page ads, all on demand, all full color digital. But I can guarantee you that they are aggressively trying to get their customers off of paper bills every day, no matter how effectively they're marketing on the statement. They don't care. Yeah, we do, which is why I can see.
Yeah, and I think there are others, right? So Citi is another good example, right? Where they've gotten it down where they've standardized the statement across all the various loyalty cards or the various cards, so that they've got a standardized approach and they have good statement-based marketing as well. And I think, but they will continue to keep trying to move people to more of a digital experience. So I think there's still this matter of finding that balancing point and what's the right percent paperless adoption. For some companies it's 80+%. For others it's 50-50 feels about right, and for others they're probably more realistic that they're going to get to 25 or 30%, and that's more where they'll sit for a while, unless they take a more of a stick approach to the process. Which is a risk. Yep. Other questions or comments? Skip.
Yeah, I think the CCM thing goes back to the first thing you brought up in your presentation. If you looked at your journey and the fact that marketing has a database, billing has this, until all of those people start talking together or have one big database and are driving the message through there, whatever the content is, it's immaterial, but that is a classic example of nobody knows what other people are doing. And I wonder, we talked about this 10 years ago. Yeah. What the heck has taken everybody so long to figure out that that's what they need to do?
Well, so one piece of that is job security, right? I mean, there's job security and compartmentalizing. I think that one of you guys mentioned that you need the senior executive sponsor as well. I guess I'd pose it this way and say, have you guys seen within some of the organizations that you work with, have you seen that chief customer experience officer really coming in and being able to change the whole way the output discussion goes and the digital distribution as well. Steve says no.
I agree with Skip. Well, we talked about the same when we developed our first inkjet, high-speed inkjet press. It was 2008, I think we rolled it out. 2009, we were talking about this. We were talking about that, and so it has been a long time, and I don't see any difference at all. The existence of a chief experience officer, I think, is good, but they've got other things that they're dealing with that are more important than the things that we do. It's our, I spend, a lot of us spend our lives talking about documents and things, but our customers don't see it that way. They've got much more important things to do.
Yeah, and a lot of that's simply compliance. And a lot of the print streams still in existence are there because that's a tough road to get beyond, and it's not where their main concerns are right now.
Passing along. Franklin.
Are we a victim of waterfall organizational structure versus maybe agile organization structure? Is that really an issue? Potentially?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't think that many of the organizations we're working with are taking an agile approach to what they do, right? Maybe IT organizations, but not on the communication side. I mean, it comes back to the compliance piece of it. It's kind of a scary thing to work in an agile environment for compliance-related pieces. No? Katie? Yeah, right. Well, compliance is over, bro.
Yeah, I don't know about it, but I just think putting things back on compliance is way overblown, because a lot of the documents that we produce or that you produce, there might be a compliance component to it, but how many regulators out there, whether at the state or the federal level, are actually forcing somebody to produce paper? Not very many. Now, they can throw some hurdles up there to try to make sure that you're getting consent and things like that, but there's not a lot of, I just think putting things back on compliance, and it's because it's a compliance document, is just a cop-out sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. It's an easy way out. But yes, I did say that there aren't. It is. Yeah. So, right, but it does come back to that idea of how comfortable is a company in being able to use electronic methods to prove compliance. I mean, I would argue, and I do with our customers, that that sending an email and being able to use the methods that we have to track and open, or whether or not they logged into a website, and those things are better than paper. Although I get it. I get that if you can prove you mailed something, you can wash your hands of it, but that doesn't solve the problem. Right, but I mean, that's what your point was. As long as you can show that you mailed it, nobody cares.
Print's always been acceptable, yeah. And yeah.
When will the industry get to the point that they accept a email delivery the same as USPS delivery? You have email kickbacks, you know if you went to a non-electronic or non-deliverable
Yeah.
address.
Yeah.
The industry, you mean the mail got there, you mean the regulators? Okay.
When will the regulators?
Otherwise, you're storing everything. You're storing every email you ever sent,
Yeah.
everything for everyone. Because what happens if you come back from a regulator's perspective? You know what I mean? Then all these data warehouses are just overburdened with stuff.
Yeah. Right. So, but the core question that you would come back to, well, right, we are overburdened, but the question before that was, when you say the industry, is it to Steve's point, is it the when will the regulators accept it?
Regulators accept it as printed. So printed mail is accepted right now as delivered. Right. The guy fell down and dropped his bag. Yeah. But, and that's what I was mentioning a minute ago. In my experience, I have not found a regulation yet. I've not found a regulated industry where the regulator doesn't allow an e-delivery option with what they believe to be the appropriate backup in place of paper. They're just, I haven't found any. Except for maybe when you need a signature, but even that, anyway, that's a small portion. But I haven't found any, and so I would say that the industry already has the tools to do it.
What's the impetus for us to make, I mean, why is it so difficult for us to make the same shift? Did they just start later in the process and?
No, I have my own opinion on that. I've actually talked to people a lot about this, and I think it's because of us. It's because of Americans. We don't want to be told what to do, and if somebody wants to take something away from us, we want something in return for it. And Europeans, I don't think, are like that. I mean, there's Scandinavian countries where there are no paper delivery of bills. Everything's electronic.
Yeah, I think there's definitely there's also a government tie to that usually. That this is just how you receive your tax documents or your pay stubs or whatever, and then there's also a size and scale component that ties into it as well. But yeah, there's we were talking to a company in Denmark, I think, in Denmark, and they were saying we just lost 30% of our print volume last year. It's not coming back. Like, deal with it, right? So in that case, when you're a print service provider, you learn to evolve pretty quickly when the print's just disappearing like that. And it's because you have this comfort with digital, you have high you have high connectivity rates usually in the Nordics, for instance, but then you also have government mandate, cultural shift. Yeah.
You have to receive all your bills and statements via electronic, simply because, first of all, printers, there's a lot of people that are employed in the printing industry. If you throw in the lobbyists and all the other political stuff, that stuff's never going to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah. So is anybody signed up for informed delivery now with the USPS? You receive an email each morning that shows you what mail's coming that day. This is a new pilot program that they're rolling out. Pilot, and now it's going to full rollout. But the design is you get an email each morning, so if you're a business traveler, you know what's going to be sitting in your mailbox that day. If you're just at home waiting to see what's coming, you know it's coming. But there is a postal play where they could scale that to say, here's a coupon that's coming later today, and here's a digital version of that you can use now. And then it starts to become more of that transactional marketing kind of blur. And we actually didn't really talk about that yet, but the marketing communications and transactional communications merging a lot more, and then the CCM platform being a customer communications management, not just from the transactional angle, but all marketing communications as well. Are you guys seeing that blurring of marketing and transactional as well, to some extent? Yes, sir.
So as it relates to acquisition marketing, how do we see the synergies between the two? And then is there a single owner for all of it, or is it siloed between the two?
Yeah. So thoughts from the panel on marketing that's acquisition retention. Is there a single owner that owns all marketing, inbound retention and acquisition, or do you see that still compartmentalized? And are you saying even within like acquisition marketing is still line of business driven, or just kind of holistically acquisition versus retention?
Your experience, right?
Yeah.
And different omni-channels that we're doing.
Yeah.
Is it a mirror image on the acquisition side? Meaning in terms of how we're acquiring customers to get into that funnel? Or, are they in sync? How do they get in sync effectively?
Yep. Thoughts?
There's a large insurance company here in this city that owns a bank too. And, they've struggled with that because can the insurance, and it's just back to the easiest person to blame is, we got to stay compliant. But, how do you market between two divisions that have a definite wall between them? Almost like a Chinese, so I think they're scared to do it instead of just launching and trying to do it, to acquire new clients between the two that they have in their database, separate databases. So a lot of it's fear driven, but to answer your question, I think that they've separated them so much from budgetary to who owns it, and then they even have separate print stream. I mean, there's just a lot of division between it that they almost think this is astronomical to overcome, when in reality it's probably easier than they think. Yeah, it's fear driven. Sure it is. Yeah. They are. Right, but I think that they've sometimes overreacted too, and they were in a fierce battle just to dump off subsidiaries because of some of the regulations that came out of 2009. So you have businesses that are no longer in existence because there was some fear at some point, rather than writing that out and going through a compliance. Right. Yep.
It's probably surprising that I don't really have much of an opinion on this, but I think again that, first of all, your question was about acquisition and retention, and in the companies that I deal with, those are still they're under marketing, but I think they're separate functions, more often than not. Was your question specifically about is there bleed over between marketing and transactional, or was it something else? Right. Yeah. So I think. Yeah, and I think that they're not very integrated. No, I've lived healthcare the last few years, and there are again both marketing functions, but they're not the same at all. Especially when you get an acquisition marketing entity that is really direct mail driven. If you get a company that really relies a lot on direct mail as opposed to multiple methods of acquisition, the more it seems to me that they're separate from retention, because retention, they've got a lot more irons in the fire and ways to try to impact customers at the call center, other things like that. But the more direct mail reliant a company is, I think the more separation there is between the two. I don't know if that matters, but an observation.
So just kind of from a First Data perspective, very transactional print output focused and digital communications, but there's more of a transactional nature. If we see more of this blurring of transactional and marketing, is there a desire to move more into the marketing communication side of the world as well?
There is, and it has been increasing.
Okay.
So not only are they incorporating more marketing within those bills, but they're also just, complementing it with, letters, alerts. You talked about rewards and other programs. I mean, those all tie in. So there's more and more cross-selling, upselling happening on that monthly communication.
Do you think that's a function of, I'm now in this print center that had a certain capacity, and all of a sudden now I'm seeing 30% less, and it's like, how do I fill the space that I have?
Right. Is it a function about driving more print, or is it a function of supporting a broader client need?
A broader client need, I would say, and I wouldn't say that, and it's probably just making more efficient use of that mail package, right? The Postal Service, right, a couple years ago said they'll give that second outs for free to pre-sort mailers, right? Take advantage of it. Put something else in that package. So.
Yeah. So insert to onsert migration, and then at the same time you start to bring the marketing people into that discussion on and selling on the value of the transactional communication. Yep. Yeah. Great.
Because again, 10, 12 years talking about inserts to onserts, inserts are really cheap. They're so cheap, and they're so cheap to insert. And you think about the lift that it takes to transition from an onsert in a complex organization, the effort that it takes to transition from an insert world to an onsert world, and everything that's got to happen and line up between marketing and operations. And it seems like a great idea, but it just hasn't been done nearly as much as it should have by now. And I think a lot of it's because it is hard, and because inserts are so cheap and just getting cheaper.
It is hard, but I will say I think people will more likely, to that point of, right, the statement gets read. Honestly, if I get something full of inserts, I don't necessarily look at those inserts, but I will read my document. So, there's a chance of it getting read when it's on the page of the statement when you first get it. I will then, look, okay, when do I owe? What do I owe? All right, I got a week or two. I'll come back. I may, reread it, right? There's a lot more, readability, retention, rereading when it's on the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you brought up Verizon earlier. They've done a good job of inserting tied into their rewards program. But still, does the person read it, or do they know how many points they have? And I've gotten on my Verizon, I have like 200,000, but I still couldn't buy a pack of bubble gum with it. I mean, it's just, so there's a tie-in of, I know, of all of them. So, but the industries are definitely set up for that. Like, I think of utility businesses where you don't have to acquire new customers because they have to buy from you. But what if you could reduce your cost with some, inserting or other mechanisms? A lot of them do it with a magazine, and maybe that's because of the legality of it. But I think there are definitely opportunities. You know, but it is difficult to pick a Valpak envelope up unless you think there's a $100 bill in between the two coupons that you look at frequently. So
No, that's interesting. I wonder how many people actually look at a bill or a statement past the first page when they open it. I absolutely, I don't. And what reminded me of that is that when we get a Valpak, I open the Valpak and I go through it because it's local and because there's a good chance that there's going to be something in there that I'll need. But I hate to admit it because I'm in the same business as you are, but I don't read past the first statement. For any bills that we do still get in paper, I don't read past the first page.
Where the post office is actually incentivizing you to put, if I read it right, put promotional functionality and offers within your mail piece. Is that correct?
So he was talking about the informed delivery.
2% or 2?
Well, he's
Yeah.
talking about so I was talking about informed delivery. You're talking about the postage discount in the promo calendar.
Yeah, which is tied into
Yeah.
the program you were talking about.
So it's a couple of things. So two, one of them is emerging technologies, and USPS is making the informed delivery component one of those. So for example, so to understand it, you need to know the definition. So what it looks like is, let's say you get 5 pieces of mail, right? It shows up in your mailbox. It shows up on your phone as a text message. You have the ability now, if you're a savvy marketer or a savvy biller, to replace that envelope or augment it with the marketing message that's clickable. So they have a paper to pixels initiative. So they want you to click on that so that they can do that. And it's a free service, like the 2 ounce free, and they're going to 3.5 ounce now. So that's the next level. So there is no, and they're getting rid of 3-digit, and they're going. So it's becoming, yeah, it's becoming simpler to do that. And so they're really trying to push the electronic part and incentivize you to do that. So there's the combination. You heard it here first, people. You'll hear it in 3 weeks at the National Postal Forum.
It's going to work on that phone?
It will.
Trend on the digital mailbox.
It's gone, right?
Well, it's not gone. It's not gone.
Being reinvented with the USPS.
Well, so the Postal Service, had an opportunity to get into that space about 15 years ago, and they said no. I think that the challenge now for them is that, so the challenge for them though is that they have to prove that they're not competing with private industry to do it now. So they have to show that. They could go in now and say, okay, there are a lot of startups trying to do this. There's some various other entities trying to do it, but nobody's broken through. So we can be that entity to break through. It's one angle they can take. But then if you look at ePost, hasn't really done much in 15 years, right? You know, they got up to 2 million registered accounts, but nobody sends barely anything through there. Do you use your ePost account? Very little from Paul, right? So, and their pricing model is not very favorable to move from print to digital to go through ePost. I think that there are, so I was just at Payments and I was presenting there about the disruption that you can find in the ways to disrupt that market, and it's more bill consolidation, it's improving the bank channel, but then it's also looking at other existing destinations, so kind of going through the Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, PayPal, Dropbox, Evernote, other places that consumers are already going, cloud storage locations, then other daily access points, including the banks. Right, and then it's thinking about how those could play a role in the future. But there really hasn't, I think that you'll see the next wave coming more from the banks improving, because that's where most consumers feel most comfortable, as a centralized location, my bank or credit union. So that kind of the next step from there is how do you improve that channel and that access? Brian, you still have something back there? We passed it. So one thing I wanted to make sure I came back to, because I was curious from Steve's section on the accessibility. You had your pie chart of all documents accessible, some, none at all. I was just curious where people stood on that accessibility curve, or your clients, if it's more like your client organizations. How many people feel like they're, I guess, more fully all documents have accessibility in play? Okay. Some documents still, okay, some, none. We're just not thinking about accessibility, or it's a topic that Ernie and I have talked a lot about as well. And just, I'm curious, like, what you're seeing from a Donnelly perspective in terms of how important is it, and how our business is kind of approaching it.
You can track it directly back to how regulated the industry is, and not just the industry, not just the regulation in the large sense, but specific parts of the company. And so what I mean by that is that you look at somebody like United Healthcare or Anthem. They've got 3 or 4 major parts of their business, right? So you got commercial insurance, you got Medicare, Medicaid, and retail, the exchanges. And the ones that they spend the most time on worrying about accessibility is Medicare. And why is that? Well, because CMS has a big hammer, and they will use it, and they have used it. And so, but on the other parts, you look at somebody. Let's go away from healthcare. You look at another company that does a lot of consumer business. Anybody, and the ADA has never really been proactively enforced. It's been reactively enforced if somebody complains, but it's never been proactively enforced. And so if you're not in a specific industry where the regulator has specifically said you will do this, it's very, very hit or miss. You can look companies that have done the best, and I have no data to back this up. It's just all anecdotal. But companies that have done the best at accessibility are companies that have gotten sued or have been threatened to be sued.
It's kind of like e-discovery, Who cares about e-discovery until you litigate it against, and you have to come up with a solution, the discovery solution for the last 5 years of everything you've ever touched with an email or anything. So it's the same boat. Until you get sued, you go, I don't really care about it.
We do actually business with a bunch of the cruise lines. We produce, I don't know if you go out on cruises. I don't cruise, but if you go on cruises, you get these personalized documents that tell you all about your cruise, and we do a lot of those. And interesting thing happened about a month ago. We've been doing the same program for this one cruise line for 12 years. I mean, it's evolved over time, but it basically does the same thing. Out of the blue, they call up and say, our documents need to be accessible in 2 months. Where have you been? And it became very important. Now, I don't think that there was a legal issue behind that, at least an immediate legal issue. So somehow, somewhere within the organization, they just must have decided that it was time. Yeah. And now they're go, full speed ahead.
Right, they're trying to market it. That's like, especially cruise line, you might have a need for a larger format print or otherwise. Yeah.
Because, what happens to that part of the segment of the industry that you're not able, or at least you have a way of reaching better than maybe your competitor does because you're
Right. So
people with disabilities have better, are more able.
So it's a competitive differentiator to provide accessible documents. Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah. Right. Here.
which is not accessibility related, but it's more a compliance regulation. Yeah, it was where they had to be able to prove they were not overcharging, and so they used our software to go in and pull all of the data out of the statements, all their credit card statements for the last 10 years, and then pull that into an analytics program to be able to go through and prove that they had not overcharged. So it was a reactive type of situation, but it was a very good use of data technology, document technology.
Yeah.
We're not built to be mined in that up front. Going back to what you were saying about tagging, 12 years ago, they weren't worrying about looking forward 12 years to extract that type of data from the document. So that's why these back-end solutions can be highly valuable, because the government came down with a hammer on this one. And they said, hey, all the troops, are getting screwed while they're away from home. We're not going to stand for this. How are you going to do it?
Thank you. All right. Other thoughts on accessibility or moving on? Last burning questions, comments? Okay, here we go, Franklin.
Talking about document strategy and communication strategy, I mean, if you looked at the Fortune 1000, I mean, first of all, what do you think is the percentage of those companies that actually have a communication strategy? And second is, how many of those are actually maybe have polished it off in the last, 2 years and actually are, because it seems to me like it's something that it needs a little more attention.
So you're saying we should do more research on it? So I think every one of those companies would say they have a communication strategy. The reality is there are plenty of ways to interpret what a strategy is, right? And dusted it off. I actually think that everybody. I think the difference is the conversations are happening in pockets of the organization, not at an enterprise strategic communications level. Is that general?
Or maybe they are happening higher, but the movement to bring it all together is not a fast thing, right? Right. It's not a.
Well, I think a big part of it too is what you alluded to earlier. It is really a cultural issue here in the States. I mean, till they put that beeper in your car to put your seatbelt on, I still drive down 2 blocks in my residential area until I absolutely get bugged by that. Maybe they should put a beeper on your mailbox. And every time you get mail put in, it goes off. I don't know. I think it's cultural. It really is. It's just related to how we like to be told or don't like to be told what we have to do.
So I actually think that there's been an improvement in that in the last 4 or 5 years. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago, that I saw our first RFP where somebody took a real true swing at trying to figure out the right mix of vendors to do to have a real communication strategy. And I've seen plenty more since then. So I think whether or not any of them have succeeded, it's a lot different than it was before that, because before that they weren't even trying. So yeah, I do.
All right, here we go.
So this is going back to what forces people to do stuff. So in your fair nation here in America, it's an act of Congress to make something happen, right, when it comes to mail. There's more advocacy groups for USPS and driving that for all of the billions of dollars of revenue and people it supports. In Canada, we had a postal strike. Overnight, 25% of the volume went away because people signed up for electronic stuff because prior to the postal strike, they got a mail piece that said, even if your bill doesn't come, you still have to pay it.
So how were the Russians involved in this one?
There's still an inquiry out there. but where I'm going is that it forced them to do stuff, and I think that may not have necessarily occurred here. And kind of going back to the cultural stuff, right? And and those companies took a hit, right? I mean, you got a company on that side of the border too. They took the hit. The other part of it is that most of those companies that are in the print business are now in the electronic business. If they don't win the print and the they think they've expressed that it's a loss. You know, if they just took one or the other, right? Because then you don't have control of the account, so to speak. You know.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap, Skip. And thank you guys for presentations and panel. And Skip, thank you for hosting or helping set up the Omaha event.